It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Professor Len Crocombe, honorary professor at Papua New Guinea Dental School, where they affectionately call him Professor Gandalf because he looks like that Lord of the Rings character. Past federal council of the Australian Dental Association, or no, you're still on that council, right?
Just retired 2 weeks ago.
Okay, just retired 2 weeks ago. Past head of Oral Health Services, Tasmania, which all Americans know where Tasmania is, an island towards south of Australia, towards the South Pole, because that's where the Tasmanian devil lived on the Bugs Bunny show. He's worked in private practice, the public sector, and academia. He has been a state and federal councillor of the Australian Dental Association for many years. He has published over 70 research papers. I mean, that in itself is just mind-numbing, and given over 160 presentations. He regularly travels to Papua New Guinea to examine final-year dentistry students and postgraduates, as well as give advice on improving oral health. He is just officially retired, but still looks after some PhD students, will continue to publish papers, and keep his association with Papua New Guinea. The dental school in Papua New Guinea was established in 1998 and has trained over 100 dentists, largely through the efforts of visiting academics and dentists from Australia, coordinated by Professor John McIntyre of the University of Adelaide. The 2017 Section 8 ICD grant supported a visit by Professor Len to conduct staff development at the dental school and to assist with development of viable dental association. Len is currently actively involved with mentoring some of the top P&G students and helping them develop public health research projects, which are critical in the planning of future oral health services. My gosh, when I go to your ResearchGate page, I mean, you're just a dentist brainiac. I mean,
yeah, right.
You are. I mean, you are. You absolutely are. But I would imagine living in Australia, and then your ancestry is England, or look at all the countries. For the unit, I think we'd probably learn a lot about how dentistry should be practiced in Sydney and Melbourne and Tasmania when you study how it exists in Papua New Guinea. I mean, is that Papua New Guinea?
That's exactly right, actually. When I go there, I constantly, ad infinitum, bore the hell out of them probably, and they're very polite. They'll sit there and listen to what you say and then probably walk out the door and say you're a complete idiot. But other than that, that's exactly what I've been saying is that in Australia, and it's probably worse than America, everyone can't get access to dental care. So there's a large section of the population with terrible oral health. Well, in Papua New Guinea, if in developed countries like America and Australia can't afford to supply dental care to everybody, well then how in the hell is a developing economy like Papua New Guinea, which has, get ready for this, 180 languages, over 8.5 million people, has 170 dentists, okay, with 2 oral and maxillofacial surgeons in the country with the highest incidence, according to the World Health Organization, the highest incidence of oral cancer in the world. So for them to try and tackle oral diseases via supplying services is just about impossible. I actually spoke to the oral maxillofacial surgeon, the lead surgeon from the Port Moresby General Hospital, and he says it takes 3 months for them to get results from biopsies. So they can have someone come in, they do the surgery, they take the biopsy, and it won't be 3 months before they realise whether they've got it all or whether it's continuing to grow or what. So imagine trying to work under those conditions.
Let me just see. I mean, I can't believe what I just heard. Are you saying that that Papua New Guinea has a population of 9 million with 108? What is you're saying 8.5? Well, Google's reporting 9 8,119,000, but you're saying 8.5.
Well, there you are. I wouldn't dare question Google.
My mom is a very religious woman, and anytime I ask her a question, she doesn't know. She says, "Well, that's why God made Google." And but it has a population of 9 million, and it has did you say 188 languages and 170 dentists?
No, I said 850 languages.
850?
Yeah, languages and about 170 dentists.
Oh my gosh, that is just
Yeah.
got to be a wealth of study of human nature. And
It is.
since you said that, I want to back up even further. I remember in dental school, Bernard Butterworth told us in anatomy class that they're never going to find a million-year-old liver or kidney or pancreas. But they're going to find teeth anywhere. And he told everyone in our class, if you're into dentist, if you're already a dentist, you're halfway an anthropologist. And the anthropologists are telling us that everything we see in orthodontics, they don't really see going back for the last million years. They're saying that the first 108 billion humans that lived didn't have all this orthodontic stuff going on. So they're asking the orthodontists, what the hell's going on? First of all, do you agree with that? Do you think?
Oh, yeah.
So what is your how did your mind wrap around that issue?
Well, of course. One of the issues is that they didn't have a lot of dentistry, obviously, or dental problems in the past in Papua New Guinea. But yeah, so I mean, Papua New Guinea is the first place in the world to actually start settling down and using agriculture, and the reason why is it was such rich land. So, it's in a tropical area, lots of rain, and so how we put it, it's the people are very intelligent. The people have moved ahead. It's just been the history which has undone them. From the point of view of archaeology, obviously, dental plays a major role in that. I mean, it is in teeth where we find DNA from old teeth, and that's where we can get things going. Obviously, looking at teeth, you can work out diets and things like this. And of course, dentistry was practiced back in ancient Egypt. Used to use wax and put it in grooves of teeth and things along these lines. So, yeah, I'd say dentistry plays a huge role in archaeology.
But the fact that we developed all these malocclusions and overbites and all these orthodontic issues that they don't find in anthropology you go back 1,000 years, it's kind of gone. Do you think that was just a change in diet? Some people said it might have been caused by fire. That when you invented fire, that you started the process of softening up the food, and that changed all the force vectors on the face and chewing. Do you think that was a big part of it?
Yeah, I could imagine that would be a big part of it, wouldn't it? Because fire's part of it. They also ate a lot of gritty foods. So basically you wore the teeth down. That made room for wisdom teeth to erupt. Now it doesn't happen, so we've got to start taking out all these wisdom teeth. I guess also that if you had troubles with your occlusion, in caveman days, if you like, you didn't live long because you couldn't eat well. So it's a whole mass of stuff. Maybe we could say we're wimped out, in at least the last 100 years with our medical care and everything else. The people who wouldn't have survived are now surviving.
Well, sapien is one of the weakest species ever. I mean, if you look at the temperature range that humans have to live in compared to like ants and all these big other insects and things like that, we have a really narrow range of conditions of oxygen, temperature, humidity. I mean, we're not, we're nothing like a scorpion or an ant or a cockroach. I mean, we're pretty wimpy.
Yeah, well, as they say, when the atomic war happens, they will be the ones to survive, and we won't.
Yeah. So,
but anyway, that's somewhat off Papua New Guinea.
So where do we? So do they have a? So what does their DMFT look like there versus, say, Australia?
Bluntly, we don't know, right? What I would another little anecdote is I had a researcher friend arrange to do a national survey in Papua New Guinea. We're going back 30 years. And two of the people collecting the data went to an island in Papua New Guinea to be held up by locals with knives. And basically, they stole the computer and everything else. And so that kind of stopped the national survey. This gives you an idea of the issues we have with research. So if I was a guesstimate from the point of view of DMFT, I would expect that in the regions, with the 850 languages out in the hills, okay, very mountainous, right, out in the hills, the DMFT rates would be low because they still are using their natural diet. In the bigger cities where we're importing sugar, because they don't grow sugar there, we're importing sugar-type foods. So those who actually have got jobs in the city, I'm expecting that they're the ones that are going to have the higher DMFT rates. So, as they say, a disease of the rich these days is dental caries.
So you said something even more profound. I mean, you talked about rates of lip and oral cancers, both sexes. Papua New Guinea is number 1 with 20.4 per 100,000. Number 2 is Pakistan, down to 12, almost half. Bangladesh down to 9. India. Let me see if Australia even makes the list. My God, Australia is number 7. And the UK is 19, Poland 17. My gosh, America didn't make the list. But why would Papua New Guinea have the number 1 highest rate of lip and oral cancer for both sexes?
Well, first of all, I'm assuming they're World Health Organization figures, and I don't trust them. All right, because what happens, I'm a cynic, because what happens is that they'll look, because I can tell you they haven't done a national survey of Papua New Guinea on oral cancer, okay, because we can't. So, but basically what they've done is look at surveys from small areas and then extrapolate that out to the whole country. Having said that, yes, it is extremely high. And the main reason is betel nut chewing. Now, betel nut chewing started as a cultural thing for people in Papua New Guinea who lived on the coast. And it's like, us white people getting together in the pub and having a beer. It was a social time.
A beer? Oh, you're British. I'm Irish. It'd be several beers.
I'm Australian. All right. Or a lovely Australian red or white wine. Now, how's that for pushing the barrow? But so it would be a cultural thing, and it was only done, fairly rarely. Okay, and they mix the betel nut with seashells to give lime. And they would chew on this. It would give a euphoric effect, and everything would turn red, and they would spit this out. Okay. However, what's happened since is it's gone up into the mountains, into the highlands, and people are not using seashells; they're using chemical lime, and we don't know about how cancerous that is. And they, and they're chewing it all the time. So much so that breastfeeding mothers will put it in the mouths of their babies when the babies get upset to calm them down. So you see these people with extreme, black teeth when they smile, and when you go, well, it used to be when you went around Port Moresby, there'd be all this red stain everywhere where people had been spitting out the betel nut. So we're actually seeing early cancerous changes in the mouths of teenagers now because they're just chewing it all the time, not just as a social get-together. The work on top of that is that they can grow their own tobacco in their own backyard. We're in a tropical area. And so, we can try and have campaigns in Australia on cigarette packets. We got pictures of oral cancer and all these horrible effects of smoking. But we can't even do that in Papua New Guinea because they can roll up their own leaves and make these fat cigars, a bit like Cuban cigars, and have them. So with a combination of this, oral cancer is through the roof, and because they live in villages all over the place, screening is very, very low. So by the time they tend to get seen, it's pretty advanced, and so the survival rate would be extremely low from the oral cancer.
What's the active ingredient in betel nut, and is the active ingredient what causes the oral cancer, or is it the other chemicals in the nut?
I think it's in the well, actually, we're not 100% certain, but it is. We think it is the chemicals in the betel nut itself. And actually, we just had a research project done by Elizabeth Sari, who's from Indonesia, and she travelled around Indonesia, and she found that the less ripe the betel nut, the more cancerous the chemicals were in it. And when she went to West Papua, which is on the same island right beside Papua New Guinea, she found that was the one that had the most unripe betel nut. So we can expect that it's probably the same in Papua New Guinea. So that would be a factor as well. And hopefully do a research project on that in the next couple of years.
You know, I noticed in several countries that I've been to, like when I went to Africa, I've been to a dozen countries in Africa, and there was they were chewing some stick there, and they were treating it like Americans would treat a cigarette or a cup of coffee. I mean, from what I read, caffeine is the most abused drug in the world. But have you heard of that stick chewing in Africa? I saw it in Tanzania when I climbed
I've just had a
Kilimanjaro.
Yes, I have. They do similar type things in Fiji and stuff like this. And I've forgotten the name of it. I'm certain one of your viewers will know. Yeah, that's not as euphoric, I think, as betel nut, but yeah.
Yeah, but you know what I think is really interesting is a lot of people always say, well, why do people smoke cigarettes, cut coffee, tea, whatever? You're learning that Neanderthal had horrible ears, probably wasn't a very happy human or whatever. And I think when you look at the fact that 15% addiction rate is probably a median around the world, I think that we're going to look back 1,000 years from now and say, these humans didn't feel very good. I mean, when you wake up and you want a coffee, a cigarette, or a shot of beer or wine or vodka, I mean, you go there, if they don't have cigarettes, they're chewing these sticks. They're over here, they're chewing these betel nuts, and everybody tries to treat it as a moral issue, like you're bad and you should be ashamed and blah blah blah. It's like healthcare people need to quit treating this as a crime and start saying why something. They must not feel bad. Why do people do drugs? It makes them feel better. Initially, it might turn into a nightmare and make you feel worse, but it makes me think that Homo sapiens aren't feeling as good as everybody thinks they feel.
Yeah. Of course, it's extremely addictive, nicotine. I like to call it the American Indians' revenge, because more people have probably died from tobacco consumption than the whites and the Spanish killed off of the American Indians. But
well, I mean, let's address that, because I live in a state that's 25% Indian reservation. They're always telling everybody what we did wrong, and that is so obvious. I mean, America was built on two mortal sins: the extermination of the Native Americans, and then bringing slaves over from Africa. I mean, this country is built on two very bad mortal sins, but everybody's got faults, and it was the American Indians that introduced the planet to smoking nicotine. Right?
Exactly.
And who do you think, and this is so politically incorrect to say, but it deserves to be asked. I mean, how many Americans do you think over the years have died from smoking cigarettes?
Millions. In Australia, a smoker lives on average 12 years less than a non-smoker.
So that's right. So smoking, you jokingly say, was the revenge of the American Indians.
Yeah. And I also like to say, when you're talking about mankind, it is that Monty Python got it right. When they said, let's hope there's life out there in the stars, because there's not too much down here on Earth.
Right.
And not too much intelligence down here on Earth is what they.
That's what I always say about artificial intelligence. I say, well, I hope they invent it, because I've seen 5,000 years of recorded history on natural intelligence, and that was pretty damn pathetic. I got to ask you a personal question.
Yep.
And if it's over the line, just say shut the hell up, and I'll edit it out. But A lot of Americans were taught, and a lot of our history is wrong. You know, you read about the Alamo and all this stuff. I mean, the PhDs in history can't even get the history lessons right. But they were taught that Australia, you know, the Aborigines lived there for, you know, 70,000 years. But when the Australians went down there, it was for a low-cost prison where it was cheaper to sail down there and throw the lifers out in the open and just say, you know, we know you're not going to find your way back to England because it takes, you know, 3 months to sail. And then if you screwed up in Australia again, they did the same thing, but threw you in Tasmania, which is where the Tasmanian devil comes from, and you're a doctor in Tasmania. How much that is true and how much that is fiction?
Oh, just about all of it's true. Basically, well, I can blame you Americans if you like. After the American War of Independence, there was, you know, extremely high crime rates in Britain, and they had to put them somewhere. So they were literally putting them on ships in the Thames, and they just didn't know what to do with them because they could have sent them to America before. So literally, yeah, they had a fleet of 11 ships, sent it down to Australia, arrived in Australia in 1788, put some supplies on board. There were more convicts than anything else. And this doesn't get into the history books, but basically when they got on shore, they mixed the male and female prisoners on the shore, and literally the first thing that happened is that they had an orgy on the shore straight away. But after that, you know, the next day they announced Australia, all of Australia, the whole massive thing, they didn't even know how big it was, as you know, part of England. And so, yes, and for the first few years, they nearly starved. So one of the supply ships didn't make it there. They didn't know how to handle the soil. They spread, as did the people as did us as we went to any country, spread our diseases, which weren't common, managed to wipe out a lot of the local Aboriginal population. There was a lot of, yes, there was a lot of murdering and this type of stuff occurred. And yes, they sent the worst prisoners who reoffended down to Tasmania and put them on a little peninsula with Eagle Hook Neck, which is very small. So it was extremely difficult to escape from them, and set up a massive prison at Port Arthur for them. So, yeah, that's basically the start of Australia. And I like to joke, you know, that I imagine having to leave, you know, the wet and rainy, cold Britain, and then coming down to Australia, as you said, you know, and go to Bondi Beach or something along this lines. You know, it's real punishment.
Do you remember Ruth and George Port of Port Laboratories?
Yeah.
Remember them? They would bring me down there like every 5 years. Starting in 1990, I'd lecture Auckland, Sydney, Melbourne, you know, all around every 5 years. And the first time I went there, I thought I was so funny. You know, I went through security, and they pulled me aside and they started asking me some questions. They said, and one of the questions they asked me said, "Have you ever been accused of a crime in the United States?" And I said, "Oh, I didn't know you still had to be a criminal to get in Australia." And he did not think that was funny at all, and I almost thought he was going to slap me. But anyway, you taught me something new just a minute ago. Several things new, but why did the crime go up after the American independence from Britain? After that,
the crime didn't go up. They just had nowhere where they could get rid of the people they didn't want.
Because they used to send them to America.
Well, they would have done. And basically, you know, America and then Australia were great places if, you know, you weren't in the hierarchy of Britain. I mean, you had to be born to the right people to get anywhere. I mean, you know, to who your father and mother were decided your life for you just about. So whilst you could go to places like Australia and America for that situation and actually improve yourself. You know, you could take on land, which is, you know, you could not do in Britain. of course, it was good for those people coming from Britain, but not necessarily, they had a better lifestyle than the vast majority of them would have had if they'd stayed there. And I like to say we were managed to pinch the best, the ones who actually didn't settle, who would actually think for themselves. But obviously it wasn't good for the Indigenous people in Australia.
And what percent of the Indigenous do you think were first killed by the epidemiology, smallpox? All the I've read by virologists that going back to the Roman Empire, which was Rome was the first city to have 1 million people, that they had a millennium of these diseases, and the only people that lived had immunity to it. So that million people in Rome was people were dying right and left, all these smallpox and all this stuff. And then the ones that survived it, then they would go down there so what percent do you think were actually killed by smallpox and viruses?
Quite a large percentage.
Like how large?
The other thing, but we don't know.
Yeah,
how does that say? But and of course, with the diseases, of course, Europe being on an east-west axis meant the diseases, and plants for that matter, could be moved backwards and forwards, and they'd still, the diseases would continue on. In a country like, America, which is on a north-south axis, crossing the equator would kill a lot of these diseases off. So they didn't have the ability to, to spread diseases in the way that occurred in Europe.
One more question to tighten my grip of this story. You mentioned that when we talked about the world cancer and we talked about the rate in betel nut and all this stuff, and you said, first of all, you're a cynic, as am I, as should be any smart person, that you didn't believe the numbers. And that when the World Health Organization went there, the guy stole their computer and all that. We were taught that that when these explorers went to New Zealand at the same time as Australia, they were attacked and killed and ran off, and they were on their own. Same thing, Papua New Guinea. But when they actually landed in Australia, the Aborigines, they didn't have that aggressive response to them. I'm just like, hello.
Not initially. They did
right.
Right.
But they could land and get a foothold. And they couldn't in New Zealand because they were attacked as they were coming on the shore in New Guinea, New Zealand. But in fact, one guy I was reading his autobiography said that he was surprised that when they were on shore that a lot of Aborigines that walked by acted like they didn't even notice or care or just going about their way. Have you read any of that, or is that true?
Well, when the white men came to Australia, I do know in Papua New Guinea there was, they thought it was their ancestors coming back, because they were white. They came in these sail ships. They looked strange, and so possibly it was their ancestors coming back as well. We did have a war, particularly in Tasmania. It was actually called the Black War. Between the whites and the Aboriginals, and basically, at the end of it, the whites managed to talk the Aboriginals into moving onto Flinders Island, a little tiny island off the north of Tasmania. Of course, the very worst thing you could do from the point of view of diseases, because you're talking people who were nomadic beforehand, and you're setting them in one spot, putting clothes on them, all of which hold bacteria in, getting them to sleep on the same straw mattresses all the time, when before they would have left the bacteria behind when they went to the next ground to hunt. And so, of course, basically a lot died off. And now we don't have any purebred Tasmanian Aboriginals alive anymore. We still do have, though, a strong Aboriginal community, but nobody's, purebred from those times.
And when you go to, I noticed this on missionary dentistry one time. I was on a missionary dental trip in another country, and the dentists all showed up. So the dentists they went to check everybody's teeth, and I was sitting there thinking, I don't know if teeth's the big issue. It seems like scabies and wormies is a bigger issue. And so a couple of us dentists drove into town. We found a doctor, went to a pharmacist, and together it only took I think $800 to buy all of his medication to go back to this village. And I thought actually getting the scabbies out of their hair and deworming them was more relief, unless you had a severe toothache. It was more relief. But when you go into Papua New Guinea, do you think betel nut chewing is at the end of the day a much bigger issue, or do you think it's decay and abscesses, or how do you balance those two needs?
Really, it's not a matter of balancing, I don't think. You've got to tackle them separately. Okay, so as I said before, we've got to do something about the betel nut chewing, and it's extremely hard, with 850 languages. Okay, but it's not us coming in saying this is what you should do, and the same with the oral health. I'm expecting it to get tooth decay to go through the roof as the country slowly develops. That'll get worse and worse. So it's a incremental step type thing, and I'm constantly saying that it's not for me to come into Papua New Guinea and say I'm the guy with all the answers here. Okay, I'm not. It's basically I don't understand these 850 cultures, what they mean, exactly what happens, what the lifestyle's like 100%. It's really a matter of I see my role as helping the locals come up with the solutions for the health problems in their own country. I actually see it as a bit of a greenfield site in that they haven't yet been corrupted by the biomedical model that we use in developed countries, and that they could start doing something completely new. Okay, it's I actually believe personally that the women have a larger role probably in population health than the men do, because the men are, loyalty to your village and village members is the number one loyalty. They call it the one tox system. Okay, and everyone wants to be a big man in their own village, and so loyalty to your country or to your province is a long way down the list. So when people do get elected to Parliament in Port Moresby, their number one thing is to look after their village people. So you can go in and there'll be a Minister for Health one time and you'll have a good relationship with him, or it's always him, okay? And then you will go in, a year later, and there'll be a new Minister for Health. And what the new Minister for Health does is he cleans out the health department senior levels of anyone to do with the previous minister's village and puts in his own people, which means, this cultural, the knowledge, organisational knowledge just disappears every time there's a new minister. It also makes, corruption, as we would call it, rife in Papua New Guinea. So people, it's not uncommon. Well, actually, it was one classical story, and there's millions of them, we ended up, when I say we, the school in Port Moresby ended up with these Chinese chairs. And I prefer... to be honest, I prefer the ADEC chairs because they're nicely designed that you can use them in the middle of nowhere, and when they break down, they're pretty easy to repair, and they don't usually break down. So there was these Chinese, and I said, well, where do these come down? At least you should have the same brand so as that you can transfer parts around the country. And I was told that the company had lost an oil contract. And so as a consolation prize, they gave them the dental chair contract. Of course, they knew nothing about dental chairs. And so I saw these chairs and they're not maintained. There's never a maintenance contract when you supply the material, supply the equipment. And so it was all, of course, falling apart when you go there. So it's just part of the whole mass. Also, the other big thing which occurred was during the Second World War, there was, much fighting with the Japanese. As a matter of fact, we were lucky to stop the Japanese before they got to Australia. They managed to stop them in Papua New Guinea. And we stopped them on the Kokoda track, which was a track which goes from north to south, Papua New Guinea, and much death. And basically they outweighed their supply lines, which was fortunate. So they were able to bomb the hell out of them and stop them getting supplies. But this basically established the cargo cult, because prior to them, Papua New Guineans hadn't seen many of these warplanes, warships, all this technology, brought all this cargo with them. And basically, literally at the end of the war, when all the soldiers left, they literally would build wooden planes and pray to the planes, hoping that these white people would come back with all this cargo. So it was called the cargo cult. And so now what happens is when people from the highlands come down to Port Moresby, they'll camp on the outskirts of Port Moresby, and they're called I've forgotten the name. The Ferals, I think, and they basically camp there, and well, and if you're walking around Port Moresby, they are quite likely to stick your knife in the back and say, well, you got cargo, I want cargo, give me cargo. So, and it's that dangerous around Port Moresby that I get picked up from the airport, taken to the hotel, which has 10-foot high fences, razor wire on the top, and 2 guards who salute me as I go in, and makes me feel important. And then he picks me up and takes me to the uni to look after the students. And when I see a market, I say, wouldn't it be good to go there? And he says, no. And one time we went to the Kokoda track, and we had 2 guards with us, one with a shotgun. So it gives you an idea. I've got to tell you this one. Another story was he picked us up and there was 2 holes in the back of his car. And I said, what are these? And he said, they're bullet holes. This is Mahmood Siddiqui, who runs the dental school. And I said, And he said, I stopped, like South Africa, you don't stop at the lights. Okay, at night time, you just keep going because it's dangerous. So basically, he got to a roundabout, slowed down, and 2 people with knives stuck them through the window, said, we want your car. So he said, well, you can have it. He got out of the car and they left him with his mobile phone. So he rang the police. And so the next morning he rang them again, said, about my car. And they asked, is it such and such a make, of such and such a colour? And he said, yes, it's in the backyard here at the police. So he went and picked it up, and there were bullet holes in the back of the car. He went and checked that there wasn't blood stains on the seat, and then got in the car and drove it away. And he thought, I'm not going to ask the police what happened here. So I can tell you lots of stories like this. However,
I love these stories.
But usually out in the provinces, it's usually pretty safe, but it can change at the last minute. Like we went to Mandang a few years ago on the north coast of Papua New Guinea for a conference, and I took my wife because it was safe. But what happened is that there was a massive strike at a mine, and all these miners were in town, and we were told, no, don't you leave the hotel grounds. So it can change at a moment's notice.
And I also want to say that Guy, you said so many things that I want to comment on. I'll go back to ADEC chairs. That you liked ADEC chairs. You didn't have to maintenance them. When I was little, my dad on vacations, he'd always want to go to the biggest theme park, like St. Flags over anywhere. They have like 30 locations in Disneyland, all that kind of stuff. And he liked to go see any plant where they give tours. So when our family bought a station wagon, we drove to Detroit and watched them make it as they pulled us along on a golf cart thing. And my dad loved beer, and so we saw Budweiser in St. Louis. We saw Coors beer made in Colorado, which I thought was very interesting because at the time he wanted to make all of it, didn't want to outsource anything, so he made his own bottle. And his chemist actually discovered a tooth-colored porcelain and was selling it to Dentistry. So Adolf Coors, his name was Adolf, and of course he had to drop the name Adolf after World War II, just like Adidas. His name was Adolf too, Adolf Deed, but his friends called him Audie. And so they said, well, you can't be Adolf Doss after Hitler, so now it's Adidas, or known as Adidas in America, and it doesn't stand for All Day Long I Dream About Soccer. But Ken and Joanne, Ken was the engineer of ADEC chairs, and his idol was Henry Ford, who I know is a flawed man, like all flawed men. Walt Disney was flawed. Theodore Seuss, known as Dr. Seuss, he's being thrown under a bus, and all I want to say about it's not cancel culture, it's accountability culture, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly.
I mean, Henry Ford did some really good things, so did Walt Disney, and so did Dr. Seuss. Were they flawed and did a lot of rotten stuff? Of course. So has, I think, every person on earth. But anyway, Ken Austin, the founder of ADEC Chairs, his idol was Henry Ford. And when I went on vacation one time when we went through Oregon, my 4 boys, we stopped there, and they were little kids. And Ken and Joanne they both passed away a couple years ago. They were so adorable. But Ken liked old cars, and he said what he liked about Henry Ford is if you found any other Ford car ditched in a ditch, rotting, rusting away, all them parts fit the other ones. And when he set out to build ADEC chairs, his goal was to never change any design or part or anything. So it was all, and he only had to make one change in his entire deal to the platform of his chair. Do you know what that was?
No.
As Americans got really huge, really fat, he had to change a base plate because people would lean back and then the patient would fall out of the chair. And when a patient falls out of a chair, I just think they're just being very down to earth.
Oh God!
But anyway, he had to change the base. With the exception of that base, any ADEC chair, if you go find one that some dentist threw away in the ditch and the junkyard, you pull out that bolt right there and you walk into that brand new chair, and it was a bolt and Henry Ford. And that's why people love Fords. I mean, right now it's funny how history repeats itself. All these countries are saying, hey, you need to start making these iPhones so that the consumer can go repair it. Well, yes. Henry Ford, by a century, he wanted any dead Ford to be auto salvaged because it was parts for all the running for. So that was pretty neat.
And that's really important in Papua New Guinea because they had these old dental chairs sitting in the corridor for ages, and they didn't have anywhere to take them. They haven't got a big garbage tip or something like this. So the risk is if you bring something into Papua New Guinea and it's not used, it becomes a hassle rather than a help. And actually, I was having dinner, and the guy who was the guy who looked after the chairs, I said, well, yeah, I've noticed you've taken them away finally. And I said, where'd you put them? He said, don't ask. And then later on, I asked again, where'd you put them? Don't ask. And I thought, all right, maybe I'm not supposed to ask. But fortunately, we were able to get from the Adelaide dental school, it closed up. And the South Australian government all governments apparently in Australia have this rule that if you've used something once, you can't use it again. Now, that doesn't make sense to me, but we ended up with 22 dental chairs, ADEC dental chairs, all of which were 10 years old or less. They actually bastardised another few chairs to make certain everything was really fully functional, put them in a 20-foot, 2-foot shipping container and shipped them to Papua New Guinea. So most of them, are being used in the dental school in Papua New Guinea now. We also had 10 go to the Royal Flying Doctor Service here in Tasmania. And I must admit, those chairs were worth a bit of money. It did cross my mind I could sell a few and, buy myself a fancy car, but I thought I'd better not. But it's
what is give us a COVID update for both countries, right. Australia and New Guinea. I know a lot of people aren't too thrilled about how the United States handled the deal, but Asia got a taste of this virus in 2012. So this was the second time they've seen that movie. America had never seen the movie again. Just like they knew it was going on, just like Ebola. It makes the news, but no one ever does anything because they just think, Well, Ebola's in Africa. How the hell could it get to America? I mean, there's only 27,000 international flights a day. How could that happen? But anyway, but give us an
Well,
update.
the joy with Ebola is that it killed fast. All right, it would wipe out a whole village. Okay, and that stopped its spread. Okay, whilst with COVID-19, it doesn't kill fast, and that's why it was able to spread so quickly. In Australia, I'll go Australia first. We had a COVID outbreak towards the beginning, and actually the first outbreak was in hospitals in northwest of Tasmania. Fortunately, we were able to control that. The premiers who are like governors of the states in Australia, some have been very quick to close borders when there's been COVID-19, I think an overreaction. But totally overall in Australia, we've had about 900 deaths from COVID-19 out of a population of about 25 million. We have not had any new case. Well, I'm trying to remember. There were some new cases in New Zealand, only one or two. I don't think we've had any new cases in Australia for a little while. Tasmania, there's been no new cases for for months. So much so that the place is just about open. No face masks. I think about the only thing we have to do is put wash our hands with an antiseptic when we go into places and list our names when we go into certain places in case there is an outbreak later on, and you can follow up the people with COVID and make certain that everyone stays at home who have been exposed. But so the issue hasn't been too bad in Australia. However, I think, we understand that we're never going, well, I understand, and unfortunately some premiers don't, but at least in the Commonwealth, federally, we understand that we're not going to wipe out COVID ever, that it's going to be a bit like influenza. We're going to need shots every now and again, annual shots, to keep it under control. So it's been the issue has been largely with older people in nursing homes and spread amongst nursing homes. Papua New Guinea have claimed not to have big problems with COVID-19, as has quite a few other Pacific islands. Okay, however, in Papua New Guinea, it's hard to believe that the case they did find was in a laboratory at the Port Moresby General Hospital, and to me, they were found because they had the testing facilities. I would not be surprised if it had spread around Papua New Guinea, but we don't know. As of yesterday, there was a report in the Australian newspaper along the lines that they'd had about 50 or 60. This whole COVID thing, we've shut down the international flights into Australia, so I can't get to Papua New Guinea to find out what, so it's held me up this year. It's about the only way that COVID-19's affected me, to be honest. It has had problems with practices having to close up, practice certain, strong infection control procedures and things along that line, mainly in Sydney, but not so much elsewhere.
Wow.
So it's nothing like America. How does that sound?
Yeah, these are the most interesting times I've lived through I turned 59 this year, and I was telling my boys, I said, first of all, when I got out of dental school, I never thought an iPhone. Are you kidding me? I never thought of that, a laptop.
Yeah.
I mean, when I got out of dental school, I still thought the two greatest inventions were the television remote control. Because if you're a child, if you're one of 7 kids, you're your father's remote control. How we change it to 3? No, go back to 10. No, go back to 12. Go back to 3.
Yeah.
And then if there was a storm, you had to hold the rabbit ears because your body grounded the something in the universe, and you could see it. And the automatic garage door opener, that was the coolest damn thing in the world. So it's only I can't even imagine what the kids listening to us still in dental kindergarten school, what they're going to see 30 years out. Because, I mean, I didn't see any of this while I was in their school. Do you?
Well, I like to say that a lot of what we were taught when we went through dentistry is just plain wrong. And I don't know what it was like in America, but in Australia, you did not criticize the lecturer. That's if you wanted to get through the course. I mean, because you were there for quite a long time. If you upset someone, your life as a student was a hell. So in Australia, we called it a Bachelor of Dental Science. And there was bugger all science in it. It was just, this is how we've done it historically. And they called you boy, listen, boy. And if you, and most of the students were male. It's all changed now, isn't it? So you were actually taught not to criticise. And our whole indemnity system and legal system encourages you to do the things the same way everyone else does, no matter what the scientific evidence proves. So that's me venting off, if you like. But I like to tell the story, and this is an American story, is that I don't know if you remember the old Commodore 64 computers, which you used to plug into your TV set. I think it's 64 kilobytes or something. That's why it's called that. That had more computer power than the Apollo 11 that went to the moon. And much less than what's in your in your little iPhone. So the kids wouldn't believe what the story was like back then. But and actually, that's another good story. I hope I'm not boring your listeners here.
No, I can listen to you all day long.
John McIntyre went to Papua New Guinea before, first in the 1960s, and he would go in the guy you mentioned earlier in the piece, and he would go in little light planes, land on dirt tracks. Okay. Aeroplane accidents are pretty high in Papua New Guinea because it's in the mountainous regions and all this type of stuff. And he would go to this village and he would supply dental treatment without face masks or glasses or gloves. And of course, we used to call it wet-fingered dentistry because you got your fingers wet, and that would be as opposed to academics who weren't real dentists because they didn't get their fingers wet. And one time he was asked, "Oh, would you treat these young guys in the jail?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, all right." And he goes in, does the dentistry, and out he comes, and he says, "Oh, what were they in jail for?" And they said, cannibalism. And he said, "My God, I wish you'd told me before I put my fingers in their mouths." He went, but there was that type of story. But then he did that for a while. He was the one that re-established the dental school in the 1990s because it completely collapsed, the one which had been there before. And that's how I got into it, is that he was getting old. He's in his late 80s now. And he said, "Oh, I'm getting tired of this," and went to the Australian Dental Association and asked someone, could they find someone to take over? And when I did my PhD, which I did having a look on the board, I finished about 10 years ago, I went to Adelaide and stayed at a friend's place, Karen's, and it was, and I said, "Can I stay here for 2 weeks until I find accommodation?" And she did all the cooking. Her husband did wash the clothes, and I put a fork in the wrong spot in the dishwasher. And so I was banned from washing the dishes. I thought, I'm on a good lurk here. So 2.5 years later, I moved out. Well, this Karen became federal president of the Australian Dental Association. And we met one time, and she said, "Len, I know you've got nothing to do. Well, you want to go to Papua New Guinea?" And I thought, how can I say no to someone I've been botting off for 2.5 years? And so that's what started it off. So it was, and that John, who was, for all his age, would rush around. Or he took me there first, and he rushes around everywhere, and I couldn't keep up. I was exhausted, and I thought, you're getting tired, But anyway, it's been quite an interesting thing. The students are very bright. Their dentistry is they're taught everything, but of course they'll do much more oral surgery, extraction stuff along this type of line than we do. In Australia, crowns and bridges would be less common. There's not much of a private practice. Most of the dentistry is supplied by government, but there are a few private, about 3 or 4 private practices in larger cities who really cater for, I guess, public servants and politicians and things along this line. And it was interesting, but lately we've been finding that the provinces are getting more and more independent, which is interesting. And even Bougainville, which has a large mine, voted for independence. Whether they'll actually get it or not, another story. But
nationalism. I mean, I saw that in like even Puerto Rico, where they wanted those military bases out of there. The Philippines wanted Subic, and I totally get that. That's obvious. But there's always the other thing of like, God, how many jobs do those guys provide? So they kick out the military bases. I'm all for. I have no idea why the United States has 600 military bases around the world. I mean, that's just, imagine if China or Russia did that. Oh my God, they'd light up the sky. But I want to get back. I want to get back to some. Make sure I got my notes right. You're saying they had 170 dentists and 2 oral surgeons, and it takes 2 months to get a biopsy back, even though 2 months.
Yeah. If you're lucky, yeah. And that's if you're in Port Moresby. It's another story if you're out in the provinces.
So even though they're the number 1 in this cancer, it takes 2 months to get a biopsy back. That is just my God. So what do you think about that? What's the solution to something that bad?
We've got to use a population health approach. We can't afford to supply treatment for all those cancers. We've got to try and do something about the betel nut chewing. I mean, I'm quite happy with the social interaction. Happy is not the right word, I guess. I'm not too concerned about if it's part of the culture that's been there for years and you just do it, on an irregular basis. But it's when you're chewing it all the time. I just don't think the vast majority of the population understand that it's killing them. Simple as that. And I think that's the first step. If we can get that information out, that would be good. But of course, there's 11 steps, they tell me, between knowing that something's bad for you and actually doing something about it. But at least we've got to get to that first step, and we haven't even got there yet.
And it's hard, man. I mean, I'm a dentist and an MBA, and I know I'm not supposed to have chocolate candy bars and honey for breakfast, but I do. I mean, it's tough. I mean, I think. In fact, I'd love to see research on how many bad decisions does the average human make a day. I mean, if you smoke a pack a day, there's 20 bad decisions. If you drink 6 beers a day, there's 6 bad decisions. If you, I often wonder, because so many people are judgmental. Like, they're like, I can't believe that person smokes. Well, dude, you're eating cheese and you're 100 pounds overweight. I mean, it's all the same. And now all these sex stuff, and now the mayor of New York City, he said something. It's like, all of our idols are flawed. All of our heroes are flawed, because I think every human on earth is flawed. And people always say, well, who can? I mean, even the Bible said, if you let the guy who never sinned throw the first stone. I mean, humans are complicated people. But I want to ask you the big question. I noticed when I started lecturing that I thought the happiest people I'd find would be in big, rich cities like London and Paris and Tokyo. My God, the happiest people I saw were in the developing countries. Like you go to America and someone has to pay $25 for their number 12 jersey of their hero. You go to Brazil, those kids are giggling 3 times as much, and they're bare skin, and they took a piece of charcoal and just wrote the number 12. I remember one time I was in Nepal. I don't think I saw a happier civilization, and my gosh, the kids. One guy lucky enough to get a Coke, and he opened it up, and like 6 kids, everybody quit playing soccer, and everybody came around. Everybody took a sip, and I tell you, each kid's little sip, there was more joy than if you drank the 64-ounce Thirst Buster. But I want to ask you this. You know all of Australia, and if you've never been there, about half the country lives in Melbourne and Sydney, about 4.5, 5 million each, and the other half live in the rest, which is the size of the United States. United States of America, Australia, and China are all the same size, about, whatever that is. And by the way, the reason Australia... everybody thinks they're so smart because they have higher scores in geography, but that's only because they named the country after the continent. So, I mean, how do that's a free question. I had to learn United States of America. I live in Australia, that's just cheating, in my opinion. I mean, I think you should have a different name. But tell me this. If you could wave a magic wand for a child, do you think you'd have a happier life being born in Papua New Guinea or Australia?
Oh, gee, how do we put it? The research shows that once you get to a certain level of financial security where you're comfortable, having more money doesn't make you happier. Bang, I'll say that straight off.
Okay, say that again. Say that again.
Once you get to a certain level of financial security, you don't have to worry about where your next meal's coming from. You're comfortable, right? Once you've got to that level, being richer, right, owning multiple houses, having the latest car, doesn't make you happier, right? So like we just said, I've retired. I'm far from rich, but I'm comfortable, and I think and to be honest, I'm finding the more assets you've got, the more things you've got to look after. And so, I'm looking at the boat I got out the back, and the tractor, and the 2 cars, and other things. And there's I don't want to be working on these things. It's a bit like with the ADEC and the Forge. I try and get things which don't have too many ads on, because it's more things that can go wrong. But I think people are quite happy in Australia. That's the first thing. And that's why we've got such, why so many people want to come here, and we have such high immigration rates from many countries. I think we're pretty, though we do have some issues, we're basically a very welcoming country of people of all cultures and backgrounds. And so I think Australia was a fantastic place to be raised, and I think most people are pretty happy. But also, I do find the Papua New Guineans are very, very happy too. The big issue there, of course, is their short lifespan. I mean, I'm an old man there, and I'm 68. Average lifespan in Australia is 85 for males, and so I would be. I'd be happier to be poor in Australia than poor in America. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, but your age, how old is Gandalf?
Sorry?
How old is Gandalf?
No idea.
Well, you're going to live longer than that guy.
Yeah. Well, as I said before we started, as they call me Professor Gandalf, I'm thinking of growing this beard and getting a staff next time I go. But no, they do seem very happy, but there is a fair bit of violence, particularly against women. It's a very male-dominated society. There is fairly regular conflicts between those 850 tribes. Okay. And usually there's not too many deaths because, people are pulling out guns left, right and centre. So particularly in areas which haven't seen white men all that much, there's lots of noise and lots of moving around and lots of waving of spears, but, usually not a lot of deaths, someone doesn't pick up a Gatling gun or something and start shooting down the other side. So overall, I think they're pretty happy, but they, the short lifespan and all that type of stuff, it's difficult. Like, you walk into I once went into the Port Moresby Hospital, and and of course it's all open plan, and someone had just been told that their their husband was going to die, and the screams and wails and all this type of stuff. And as you can imagine, that stuck in my mind. It's not uncommon. You will be talking to someone. Well, I won't mention his name, but one of the dentists who lectures at the Port Moresby Dental Hospital with him 3 weeks, and he's only in his 40s, had 2 brothers die back in the village. And so he had to travel back, and being a doctor, he was, extremely big man, extremely well respected. And when they had the funerals, well, it was his role to pay for all this stuff. And of course, he wasn't a rich man by any means, but they're happy, I guess, to a point, until there's the violence which can go on, and the short lifespans. So if we can do something about those things, I think they'll be happier.
I might be confusing, but did you know Julian Holmes with ozone therapy?
I didn't know him. I've heard of it.
But wasn't he a big deal in Australia?
Yeah.
Is that
God, you come up with everything, don't you? This guy seemed to believe that by if it's the same person using ozone rectally, is that the guy you're talking about?
Yeah.
And somehow he convinced some patients that this would help with their oral health some way. It wasn't a massive issue. He was deregistered, fortunately.
Okay, come on, quit talking bullshit. Deregistered.
He called himself professor. He basically round the twisters. Now, I'm not likely to get sued like you want in America for saying that, but basically I thought he was around the twist, I guess he could set up a shop front, call himself whatever he likes, say, I'll give this stuff to you, but it would be difficult. The board does have troubles, of course. It's, if non-dentists do stuff, it's difficult for them to punish them. But I haven't heard anything about him for years now.
He passed away, and
I guess he's not going to sue me then.
well, the thing where I was going with this is, it seems like everybody has the same thing where they, the reason people are into architecture and food and cuisine is because we're all the same species, but we eat slightly different. We have different music, different food, different everything. And these dentists, a lot of them, they like to go to Rome and Paris and Japan just to see how they do different architecture and windows. And I never knew when I gave my first lecture, I never knew growing up in Kansas that one day I would have seen 50 countries and drug my 4 boys to all of them. And they all say, I remember when they weren't even teenagers, they'd already figured out that they had traveled farther than Marco Polo and Genghis Khan. And
exactly.
They were, so excited. Of course, one flight from LA to Sydney would do that. But I didn't really care about the different architecture and things like that. I always looked at the fact that, okay, they're all dentists. They all have the same brain. They all have the same disease processes. Look, the secret is in how they slightly do something different. Because if 2 sapiens see the same patient with the same problem, and look what happened. I mean, when India crashed into China in the Himalayas, just that little mountain block keeping them apart Now you got two different languages, two different cuisines, two different religions. I mean, it's everything. And I notice every time I go down under, there was a much higher fascination with glass ionomer. And I thought, is that geographically because you were close to Japan? But man, you go to Japan, New Zealand, and Australia, back when I went there the first time in 1990, I mean, it's like, I don't even think they mention it in school hardly. And it was a religion down there. And I was wondering, as my last question is, what when you look at dentistry around the world, what differences do you see, out of the gate?
Well, someone could come from America or Britain and come to Australia, and it would be exactly the same. The teaching we're doing in Papua New Guinea has been basically the same. It's just the split between the different, the things that you're more likely to do vary between countries. I'm seeing the approach is similar. I can see, though, in the future, particularly in countries like Papua New Guinea, that we will be using more of a medical type approach where we start using more and more of the silver fluorides and the glass ionomers. And the reason why that took off in Australia was it was in Adelaide, and there was one guru, if you like, who really
Don't tell me. I'm going to go with no.
No.
Dr. No, GN, it's like bingo, BINGO, NGO. The Vietnamese dentist in Adelaide that got the $10 million Colgate grant for research. Was it? There's Jeffrey Knight.
Yeah, Jeffrey Knight. No, he goes to Papua New Guinea too, actually.
Right? But Hien No. That was his name. Hien No.
Oh, he is the one with the silver fluorides.
Yeah.
Yes, and Low is and they've been doing a lot of research in the, and so there's the silver diamide fluorides, which has has a ammonia attached to it. It's extremely alkaline, and then there's aqueous silver fluorides. So I can see, so imagine you go into a village in Papua New Guinea, and you're looking around and you see lots of tooth decay, particularly in the children. Well, by applying the silver fluorides, hopefully you can arrest the tooth decay. It makes them look black, but as opposed to drill and
I want to say something. And I want to say something else about this FDA approved. When you look at 5,000 years of history, governments are only mob. I mean, every country's been taken over by a mob. They only enforce their whatever with violence. And the FDA and all this kind of stuff, like when silver diamine fluoride came out in Melbourne, and it was a different color, different this. And the only thing that Americans can say, well, they're not FDA approved. Dude, they're not mob approved. All you're saying is that I'm not giving the mob their cut. But there's a little thing called Amazon, and I don't know why dentists don't do it more, but if you want a silver diamine fluoride that's white as opposed to black, it's in Melbourne. And then you say, well, it's not FDA approved. Well, if you want to suck up to the mob, then let your patients deal. But I have dentist friends in these other countries, and I can tell you that $500 bonding kits sold in Sydney, London, and New York are sold for $50 in India, China, and Brazil. So let your head do the math on that. And when these things aren't FDA approved, and by the way, the money is so important to the mob that the lady I bought my house from couldn't get a chemotherapy for her brain cancer that was invented in America, sold in FDA approved was the process she could get on study, and she sold her house to me to move to Scandinavia where they were already selling it. So if you think the government has your best interests at heart, I hope you're still in grammar school. You haven't made it to high school yet, but the silver diamine fluoride here is black, and in Melbourne it's white. Am I wrong? It's a potassium nitrate?
Yeah, you add. Well, first of all, I thought the silver diamide fluoride had been okayed for dental sensitivity with the in America. That's what
Yeah,
Jeff
yeah,
Knight
silver
told me.
diming Floyd.
Yeah, yeah.
But just the one made,
we,
just the one made by, I think it's Elevator Dental Care. I think it's out of Florida somewhere. But there's a different type made in Melbourne that they said they just don't have the money to go through the mob. They can't pay the bribe to get it legalized for American children. The mob's asking too much money.
Well, my understanding, actually, two comments here. The first one was that all they've done with the silver diamide fluoride is add potassium iodide. Okay, that then reacts with the silver to form silver iodide. Okay, so this is Southern Dental Industries in Australia, and or SDI, I think they call themselves, and that creates a white precipitate, right, which you then suck up or rinse and suck up, and so it's a salt basically, and so that reduces the staining. I can't understand why using potassium iodide would be a problem in America, why you even need FDA approval. But anyway.
Well, why do they need it? It's a shakedown for money. The mob did it with protection. If you don't give me 10% of your grocery store, we won't protect you. You didn't pay, and they were the ones that broke into you.
Well, Google Southern Dental Industry, and they're in Bayswater in Melbourne, in Victoria in Australia. That's number one. Number two is I like to quote your ex-president Ronald Reagan, and this is when I was in private practice, and he said, there's nothing more scary to someone in their own business than someone from the government coming in saying, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. That's the most frightening words that anyone who can hear. And I must admit, I've taken that on board. And yeah.
Yeah, and Milton Friedman's another one. I just think it's so funny how now all the young ones have decided that Milton Friedman was nuts, and they take everything he said out of context. I'm like, oh, okay, go get your MBA at ASU and come back and tell me about that 20-second soundbite you heard on the news. And Samantha Cheatham, we had on the show 1181.
Oh, right.
And she was amazing. Jeffrey Knight we've had on. You know who I can't get to come on the show, and it just really it hurts, is the legend out of New Zealand. Graham Milicic.
Right. Is that right? Oh, I don't know. Why?
Do you know Graham?
No, I don't actually.
Oh, but anyway, Graham is the he's the largest legend out of New Zealand, and my gosh, I love that guy. But Samantha, I'll tell you what, that was another one. I was going to Australia to lecture, and I don't care if you think lecturing is a good business or not or whatever, but take the $10,000 honorarium. I would fly my four boys with me, and of course I'm not going to sit back there and coach and everything. So trust me, I lost huge amounts of money on all these international lectures. I mean the honorariums didn't cover the bar tab, let alone the when they were in college. But anyway, what I loved about that is I told them they have this monster dental company. I was actually lecturing in Sydney, but I said, boys, you're going to go with me to Sydney because then we're going to take a flight to Melbourne, and I can get you a tour of SDI, which in America stands for Ronald Reagan Strategic Defense Initiative. That was Star Wars. And ADA stands for American Dental Association, but you're from the world where it's the Australian Dental Association. And love that place. And but anyway, the bottom line is she gave a tour of everything, and my God, her father was there, she was there. But what I loved about it the most is this is what I love the most about dentistry. Everyone else that goes to Australia is going to stay at the Hyatt, the Hilton, and they're going to get a little brochure, and some tourist bus going to come by. Every time we went to 50 countries, guys like you would pick us up, and the dental association say, "Oh, we're going to put you up at the nicest hotel." It's like, I don't want to stay in a flippin' hotel. I want to know what an Australian dentist refrigerator looks like. I want to know what little kids in Australia eat for breakfast. I mean, I'll never forget when the first country I went to, I think it was Poland, and I got up a little before they did, so I quietly went in the kitchen, I opened up the refrigerator, I almost lost my breath. It's like, the hell did I just open? It's all like sausages and gray ones and pink ones, and I mean, I had to stand there for like 5 minutes thinking, what am I going to eat first? And but anyway, I love the hospitality. And what's really weird is those guys were busier than hell, because you could tell all the people franticking around them. Can you look this? But we were from America, and we flew all the way there, and I brought my 4 kids. And if Samantha and her dad didn't cancel their whole damn day to tour us around, show us everything, I mean, in America, you only really find that in the South. I mean, then they call it Southern hospitality. But when you're in a different country and you're a dentist, every single dentist just treats you like family right out of the gate, and I just find that so romantic. And and I also thought it was here's the saddest part I thought about meeting SDI is that everyone knows that this filling is most likely to fail by a bacterial infection, and not just eukaryotes, prokaryotes, but that they found out, remember 2 years ago, that they're working with the fungus to help build a protective wall around them. So the fungus are in on it, the eukaryotes, the prokaryotes. And here's this amalgam that's half mercury, very toxic. The other half silver diamine fluoride. Tin, stannous fluoride. Silver, the first treatment for gonorrhea and syphilis. It's all antibacterial. And what do my dentists want? Oh, let's throw that away and replace it with an inert plastic. At least Japan, Australia, and New Zealand demanded that, well, we got to put some active ingredient in there. And you guys went with the silver, you went with the glass ionomer and all this stuff.
That's right.
And the Americans are still just putting in completely inert plastic. They only last 6 years. And you ask any one of them, dude, if Stevie Wonder put in an amalgam, it would last about 38 years. And the best dentist putting in a composite under a rubber dam with a microscope, it's going to last about 6.5 years. And damn it, if every one of them just want to say, well, not in my hands. I have special hands. And when I put my healing special hands over the inert plastic, the fungus run and hide. I mean, so I always look at all human endeavors as 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I get it. The patients wanted the tooth colored. I get it. I got a dental office. That's what they want today. But that I call that the aesthetic health compromise. And I personally think that if we would have never invented composites and we only did amalgams, the world would have probably only placed half as many fillings since I got out of dental school. Agree or disagree?
I think there's a fair bit to what you say. I've still got amalgams. I'm not in any rush to get them replaced. So there you are. I guess the hassle that we do have with amalgams, of course, is that we pick up the aerator, drill into the tooth, cause all these micro cracks through it, and then put in a material that can act like a wedge. And so it's not how we put it. And then 20 years down the line, suddenly a whole cusp breaks off, and I can see that. But I think we need a combination of the materials. I can see I can see dentistry changing along those lines, or I hope so.
And the other thing, and I hope you can do it through the Australian Dental Association, because we're not doing it here. The executive director of the Arizona Delta Dental, Alan Alaford, told me that he was actually working on it, and that is trying to get the insurance companies to be sharing their data, because you take some of these insurance companies in America that have been around since 1945, well, they already have the answer. So if we don't know what that answer is, they got billions of insurance claims, but the American Dental Association economist Vucicek, he can't get the data from Delta, and you're down in Australia, down under, and questions like what lasts longer, an amalgam or a composite, the data pool is so big, we should know it to a decimal point with 2 sets of 3s. I mean, 2 sets of 3s would be after that decimal point. That's how much data there is. But hey, man, I don't want to talk here. So it's 3:30 in the afternoon Wednesday. What time is it Thursday there?
9:30 in the morning.
Oh, well, my gosh.
See, we see the world before you lot.
I know. I'm going to start calling you every morning when I get up to tell me what the stock market's going to close at. and we'll make some money and split it. But hey, man, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for getting up early. And my God, I'd rather listen to you than Gandalf.
All right, then. Thanks a lot, Howard. We'll see you later.
All right. Have a good day.